Hey man, thanks for having us. Yeah, do you have any hamburgers? Steve, what? Steve, how do you say hamburger in Latvian? Hails, meanies and mortals, this is Fang from Lords of the Trident. As your band grows, you stretch your tours farther away from home and you will eventually be faced with the challenge of an international tour. This can be an incredibly daunting task, but exciting and potentially fruitful as well. After all, anyone can tour their home country. It gives you quite a bit of street cred to successfully pull off something international. Maybe you live next to a border and are itching to cross it. Maybe your band's in Europe and going international is a 1-hour bus ride. In either case, there are some important and sometimes overlooked points you'll want to keep in mind. Now, I'm assuming you've already done a few longer tours and there are some obvious points that we'll skip over. For example, transportation, lodging, booking, etc. If you haven't yet toured your home country and learned what works for you and your band on the road, for the love of Dio, do that first. You will be able to learn important lessons semi-close to home in a language you speak and without the threat of deportation. Number one, do you need a visa? Some countries require a lengthy visa application process in order to cross over the border. Why? Well, although you're just a band, technically you're a business that's going to be acting in a commercial capacity in a foreign land. That requires taxes, oversight, and a lot of paperwork. Many countries are a bit more lenient for bands and musical performers crossing their borders to play, especially if your stay is under a certain amount of time. For example, performers going from the US to Canada do not need a visa if their stay is under 2 weeks. When in doubt, don't assume everything will be worked out at the border. Do your research ahead of time. It'll save you from having to cancel your whole tour because they wouldn't let you into the country. On a side note, I know some of the people who watch these videos are not from the US, so as an American band, let me apologize right off the bat for our absolutely horrendous visa process. Getting into Canada as a US band was not very difficult at all. They basically just said, "Oh, you're a band? Come on in." But I've heard horror stories from Canadian bands that tried to tour the US. One even confessed to sneaking in their instruments and renting amps just to avoid the fees and headaches of the US visa process. I know, we suck and we're sorry. Hopefully things will get better in the future. Two, is your priceless rainforest mahogany teak mixture bass even allowed in the country? Some countries have very strict laws about the import of goods made from endangered materials. You may argue, I'm not importing it, I'm using it to play music. However, there's no way for a border guard to know that you won't turn around and sell it to the first person you meet. If you have any gear made out of weird material, like your white rhino horn encrusted keyboard, check with the border before you attempt to bring it over. There's nothing worse than having to leave your incredibly expensive instrument in the hands of random border officials for weeks. Number three, get your passport now. Like today. Most passports last a long time and are relatively easy to get. Passports in the US last for 10 years and might take an hour or so of your time to amass the materials needed to apply. However, depending on the time of year, you could wait up to a few months before your valid passport arrives in the mail. If you're planning on touring internationally in the next year or so, do yourself a favor and get your passport now. Like, pause the video and go do it now. Also, make sure all of your band members, even your drummer, finish and submit their passport applications well in advance. Number four, don't be an idiot. Okay, yeah, this is a general point for everyday life, but having the following in your possession at the border will not work out in your favor. A sneeze. Guns, drugs, yes, weed counts, more than 24 beers or more than 1 full bottle of liquor, a DWI on your record, or an incarceration or felony on your record. Yeah, the guns and drugs thing is pretty obvious. The DWI might not be. If you're planning on driving a vehicle during your tour, and let's face it, most of us are, many countries are not eager to let you over the border in a vehicle with a DWI on your record. In extreme cases, you may be barred from even entering the country. If you're ever wondering why some US bands don't tour Canada or tour Canada with different members, this is why. Check border crossing laws on this point, but in general, don't be a moron. Also, prepare to be searched. I'm talking every nook and cranny, every hidey hole, everywhere. They may even go so far as to ask you to completely empty all of your instrument cases, backpacks, colons, etc. Or, like us, you may go through the crossing without Border Patrol even asking you to open up your van. I don't know. In either case, plan for at least a few hours at the border in your travel itinerary. You wouldn't want to miss load-in because you were getting a pat-down. 5. Get signed contracts even if you're not making money. Having a signed performance contract for every night of your tour is required for some border crossings, even if you're not making any guaranteed amount. And even if it's not required, let's face it, it looks a lot more professional and could speed up your time at the border. If you don't have a standard performance contract on hand, just draft up a short contract outlining dates, locations, and compensation amount. Have the owner of the venue sign the contract and then scan it back to you. I'd also recommend picking up the digital version of Nolo's Music Law, I'll put a link in the description, which comes with fill-in-the-blank contracts. Alternatively, if you've got a record label in the country where you're playing, you could ask your local representative to draft up a signed letter that includes an itinerary of where you're playing and when. I'd still recommend getting contracts for each date, but this letter is better than nothing. 6. Put together a binder and make a digital copy. Get all of your information together in an easy-to-read format and place it into a hardcover binder with your contact info, and keep that on you at all times. You may want to purchase a binder pouch to hold all your passports as well, especially if one of your members has a penchant for losing things. When you arrive at the border, you can simply hand the binder to the guard, and that should give him all the information that he or she should need. Not only does this speed things along, but it makes you look more professional. When you're finished creating your binder, and before you leave, make a digital copy and put it in a place that you can potentially access on the road. A band Google Drive is a good place to store this. You may also want to take a picture of you and your bandmates' passport information pages, just in case, Dio forbid, you end up losing your passports. Don't put those anywhere publicly accessible for obvious reasons. 7. Taxes and money. Depending on how much merchandise you're bringing over the border, you may have to pay import taxes on these items. Usually the tax is on the base amount of the item, not what you sell the item for. For example, you may sell a CD for $10, but each CD costs you $1 to make. That dollar is the base price that's being taxed. You may have to be selective about how much merch you bring over the border. I mean, if you're like me and you like to bring everything, I'd recommend finding out the tax amount and running the numbers. Do you really need 7XLs for a 3-day stint? Maybe yes, maybe no, but when you have the information at hand, you can do a quick cost-benefit analysis to help you decide and convince the rest of the guys. Hey man, I ain't paying $700 to bring all these t-shirts over the border. I'm an American. I like my beer cold, my hamburgers gigantic, and my tax law completely incomprehensible. Yeah, also, the money you make is going to be in a different format and worth different amounts compared to your home currency. It's not unheard of to change your merchandise prices once you cross the border to reflect the local currency. In fact, I'd highly recommend it. In addition, make sure you check with your bank about international credit card use and any fees that go along with said use. If you accept credit cards at your merch booth, make sure you've set up an account that will allow you to do so in the country that you're touring in. Popular card readers PayPal and Square both require an address-verified bank account originating from the country you're in to accept credit cards in said country. So if you have a friend in the country that you're touring and they don't mind setting up a temporary PayPal account for you to use in their name, this may fix the limitation, but it's a lot of work, and when in doubt, switch to cash only. When you enter or leave the country, try to exchange your currency at the border or close to it. Most currency exchanges at major banks will only accept paper money and will do so with large fees. If you're in a country that uses a lot of coinage, so Canada and Japan come to mind, make sure you exchange your money as you leave, because you're not going to be able to do it in the US. Also, speaking of currency exchange, depending on your bank, removing cash from an ATM may actually be the cheapest way of getting local currency. We found out that using an ATM, or just using credit cards for all purchases, gave us a rate that was 2 to 7% better than using the foreign currency exchange at the airports. If you're doing a lot of purchasing or traveling, it may be worth it to apply for a credit card with no international fees. So with these tips and a little bit of luck, you'll be on your way to a successful international tour. Good luck, and try not to get deported. And if this video helped you sneak through customs with an entire wheel of French cheese, show your support by dropping a buck on our Patreon at patreon.com/Lords of the Trident. Thanks for watching. We'll see you overseas.